Welcome back to Mets Daily. I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live. Hit that thumbs up button, comment below, keep on subscribing as we're closing in on 4,000 subscribers, less than 100 away. So let's get there. My birthday is Thursday. It'd be a nice birthday present if you get me to 4K by Thursday. So keep on hitting that subscribe. We're dedicating a whole segment you see on that list right there to your comments from Monday's Mets Daily. So keep on commenting and maybe your name will be heard on tomorrow's show. Trade has been in the works and has been done, and that's Brendan Donovan in a 3-team deal that went to the Mariners. A great move. You know, they lose Eugenio Suarez in free agency to the Reds. They go out and get a super utility man that everybody wanted in the trade market in Brendan Donovan. The Rays were involved in this deal. Shocker, the Rays make another trade. The Rays getting infielder, slick hit defensive infielder Ben Williamson, a 3-team deal. They gave him a prospect and a competitive balance pick, meaning that Yandy Diaz is the last man standing on a potential expiring contract. He has that second-year option. You know, they have a bunch of infielders now. Yandy Diaz is essentially just their DH. If I'm the Rays, the final deal I'm making of the offseason is sending Yandy Diaz to the Mets. Because for the Mets, I've mentioned him every day, and I'm doing it again. In my final plea maybe today. Right-handed bat, veteran, good in the clubhouse. You know, beloved in Tampa. This is the final piece to the Mets offseason puzzle when you think about this lineup. And you think about a guy who could play first base for you or DH. I know he's not elite defensive first baseman, but he's played there several years. You put him at first, you DH Polanco, you have Beatty potentially in left, and then eventually Carson Bench there. You can still play the young guy. Everyone's like, Jake hates the young guys, hates playing the young guys. You can still get to the young guys. Yandy Diaz is a 1 to 2 year contract. He has a second-year option. The Mets would probably take it because he's great. So you have Yandy for 2 years as your first baseman. He can be your eventual DH. Yandy's not blocking anything if you trade for him. And if I'm the Rays, why not? Yandy Diaz becomes right now the Rays' most expensive player. If I'm the Mets and I'm the Rays here, I'm thinking to myself, we could really use a pitcher. The Rays' number 4 starter right now is Steven freaking Matz. They need a starting pitching help. And the Rays, you know, make mountains out of molehills with pitchers. Kodai Senga for Yandy Diaz. Maybe you include a prospect as well, but the Rays get 2 years of Kodai Senga in that ballpark. They get a chance to kind of reclamate Kodai Senga. Sorry, it was a long night at Benihana. And they get a chance to, you know, make Senga that guy in Tampa. To me, it makes sense. Financially, yes, it's 2 years, $30 million. Maybe the Mets eat a couple, but they basically match up in money. The next 2 years, around $30 million for both of them. The money is pretty much even. Maybe you give them a prospect as well, but to me, it makes a lot of sense for the Rays to get Senga. I'm struggling today for 2 years, and the Mets get Yandy for 2 years. Mets get their final icing on the cake to a brilliant offseason. Now, I don't think the Mets need a hitter per se. Yes, I'd be fine, guys, if Beatty's playing. Beatty's your DH/left fielder. Polanco's your first base/DH. But what Yandy does in terms of the bat in the middle of that order, he makes the Mets lineup complete. You think about how you could operate the order. Hell, you could have Yandy leadoff. You have Lindor leadoff, Yandy as second, Soto as third. That makes it a switch hitter, a righty, a lefty, then 4 Bichette righty, then 5 Polanco lefty. Like, the lineup just becomes unbelievably dynamic if you add a veteran presence that doesn't strike out a lot and puts the ball in play like Yandy. You're going to see a Mets lineup that could be amongst the best in the sport with one more addition. And I just think he's the guy. And I know you're going to say, here goes Jake on Yandy again. But if you think about the match and how it's just a match made in heaven, and with the Rays yesterday making another trade, you're thinking to himself, like, the Rays with everything going on with their ballpark situations, they're trying to have, you know, the ballpark ready to go for next year. They're still playing at the Yankee Spring Training Stadium. Like, you start to think, you know, I don't think they'd be I think they would want some pitching. I think they would be fine shedding Yandy. Yandy's not a long-term guy, long-term plan at Tampa. He's 34 years old. So for the Mets, it's kind of like, all right, we get Yandy for a year. We see about the CBA next year. Like, maybe he's a part-time player next year, but you can get 1 year of 30 or 25 and 90 out of Yandy, and he hits 300. I mean, think about it. The Mets would have a 300 hitting Bo Bichette, you know, with a 350 on base. You'd have a Yandy hitting 300 with a 380 on base. You'd have Soto hitting 290, 300 with a 380, 390 on base. The Mets would be an average on-base demonic baseball team if they could make it happen. They would also have an even more elite bullpen if they could add JoJo Romero into the piece. Now, we know Brendan Donovan's going to get traded. Now, the next thing we would say is maybe Lars Nootbaar makes sense now, a name we've talked about this offseason. A name that didn't excite you, but now that the Mets got Luis Robert, you're saying, you know what? We don't have a full-time left fielder. We have the potential of Benj, which, again, Benj is going to get a chance. We have the potential of throwing Beatty out there. We have the potential of Tyrone Taylor out there, which at this point, I'd rather again, we like Tyrone Taylor. You want Tyrone Taylor playing the most once a week if he's on this roster and being a late game defensive player. That's how you want Tyrone Taylor. You don't want him hitting. He was not a good hitter for this team. Good guy in the clubhouse. We like him. He's great defensively. Can't hit. So Lars Nootbaar you think about. But JoJo Romero, when you start to think about it, makes so much sense if the Cardinals are wheeling and dealing, which they are, because JoJo Romero is going to enter free agency next year. It's the last year of arbitration. He's coming off the best year of his career. If there ever was a time right now for the Cardinals to capitalize on a great season from JoJo, career year from JoJo Romero, it's right now. Going to be a free agent. You can get something for him. For the Mets, would you do a Vientos for Romero? I know a lot of people are like, Jake, why do you always want to trade Vientos? I just don't think he fits into this Mets roster right now. Fine. You want to do a Peterson for Romero? You want to do a Reimer for Romero? I think there is very much a deal to be had, and the Cardinals would be very smart to move Romero now while his, value is at its highest. JoJo Romero for the Cardinals, guys, had a 2.07 ERA in 61 innings, giving up just 14 earned runs. He gave up just 2 home runs. Not a big strikeout guy, 55 strikeouts, but this is a pitcher who's one of the best relievers in the sport, and you start to salivate when you think about JoJo Romero, Brooks Raley, AJ Minter. The Mets having maybe the most dominant left-handed bullpen in baseball with those 3 guys in it. And you could mix and match and do a lot of different things with Romero, who also had 8 saves for the Cardinals last year. Coming off the best year of his life. He's had 6 years in the big leagues. He's about to be a free agent. Let me know in the comments, guys. But to me, I think there's very much a deal that can be had between the Mets and Cardinals. Cardinals clearly are in business right now. They just traded Brendan Donovan. JoJo Romero would really be the icing on the cake to the bullpen. These are 2 trades to me that would be the icing on the cake. You get Yandy, you get Romero, and the Mets are winning the National League East. That's simple. Get a guy when his value is at his highest. Yandy Diaz, for the team trading. For the Rays and the Cardinals, that's where I'm thinking too. This is kind of the Jake GM brain. Not that I'm a GM, but all right, we just had Yandy at 300. He's 34. He is aging. Let's sell him now while we've made several. We traded Lowe. We traded Lau. We just got another infielder. The Rays are in business. Cardinals are in business. JoJo Romero is never going to be this good. He's not going to have a 2.07 ERA probably if he came to the Mets. If he did, you'd love it. But why not get these guys when their contracts are expiring and their values are at their highest? And I'm not saying the Mets should give up the world for these guys. For Romero, for a Yandy, I'm thinking of Vientos. Even a Reimer could be an overpay, but you can't keep all these infielders. I'm thinking of Wenninger. I'm thinking of Senga. I'm not saying trade Tong. I'm not saying trade Benj. I'm not saying trade even an AJ Ewing. But you got to send some of these prospects out. And I'm not even saying trade Beatty, to be honest. Now, if you said Beatty for Diaz, I'd do it. But I'm not saying trade Beatty. I'm saying trade some of the spare parts that you have and get the final pieces to an absolutely remarkable offseason. I told you we were closing in on 4,000 subscribers, so we'll dedicate a segment to you, the viewers. Thank you so much. Keep on leaving those comments. We're about 95 away as we record this on Tuesday morning, February 3rd. By Thursday, let me wake up, record Thursday's show. Let's get to 4K. So push this out, guys. Hit that share button. Click that thumbs up. Keep on commenting. Follow your boy at Jake Brown Live. But please, keep hitting that subscribe and keep sharing this channel. A friend of mine said she came home and her dad was watching my show. Now, I think she said he doesn't like me that much, but she went back in the room and he was back and watching again. So to that dad, appreciate you watching. I love you. You might not like me, but again, we're all fans. You can disagree with me as long as we respect each other and we love the New York Mets. So shout out to, I don't know his first name, but shout out to Pops for watching Mets Daily. And we'll have a Diet Coke this year at Citi Field for sure. All right, let's go to the comments from Mets Daily Insider member Shakamoto. good French pronunciation and accent, Jake. You never fail to surprise Lowell. Yeah, I mean, listen, I took French for 7 years. Utter waste of my time. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. French is a beautiful language, but as someone who's working in the baseball world, it would have made a lot more sense to know Spanish and to figure out how to roll my R's. Now I can't. Too old. Can't roll an R. Spanish would have been the move. French was a waste, but yeah, un petit peu. Je m'appelle Jacques. Je suis, je parle français un petit peu. Like I could do the voice well. I could do the accent well. I'd probably fit right in France, but should have took Spanish. I always regret that. From Cryptid Keeper, would love Vientos pivot at first base, but Ty France has a decent enough bat and has really improved his defense at first base. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this. Mark Vientos' footing will be a tragedy at first base. I don't think it'll work. We've seen it. We've seen how slow he is. And I know I've been mean about Vientos. I just don't think he is the kind of body frame build that can move to first and do it successfully. Ty France was not the greatest fielder a few years ago, and he turned himself into a Gold Glove winner. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Vientos can move there. But to me, I wouldn't feel comfortable with seeing a lot of Vientos at first base. I actually feel more comfortable with Jorge Polanco, who hasn't played there. JPK Mets, had a savant get an accurate gauge of arm strength at first base. Most throws you are leading people to the bag need the arm maybe 10 times a year. Yeah, it's a good point. That's why I didn't look too much into Ty France's arm strength, because I'd rather him not have a great arm because he won't throw it wild. So I guess when you're talking about throwing home or throwing a third base, but yeah, you're right. How many times are you throwing from first to third, first to second, obviously sometimes, but to me, the outs above average is much more important than arm strength when it comes to a first baseman. Arm strength is very important, obviously, when it comes to catcher, outfield, third base, shortstop. Brian Reese says, I think Vientos is going to put the swag back into Swaggy V this year. He doesn't have to worry about playing third anymore, and he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's not a bad point, Brian. I think Mark Vientos is down on himself. He has a chip on his shoulder, and you did see some moments in the second half where he came to life. So, that's why I think, he can do that somewhere else. Right now, he's just not an everyday player. Remember, he complained when he wasn't playing a lot in 2025. He is not going to play 150 times this year. He's just not. If he's in a Mets uniform, he is not playing that many times. He might play 100 games as a DH, but with the way the Mets roster is currently constructed, Mark Vientos is not going to play enough. So I'm not saying trade him at his lowest, but I'm also saying if Mark Vientos wants to be an everyday player, somewhere like Tampa is a place where he's going to get to do that. So I think the best for his career and with a chip on his shoulder to get that swag back is somewhere else. And maybe it's here, guys, but you could comment below. Let me know, where's Mark Vientos playing? If you're having Polanco at first, Beatty DH, where's Mark Vientos playing? Now, you can argue Beatty plays left every day until Benj is ready. But when Benj is here and Benj isn't left, then you have Beatty as a DH and you have Polanco at first. When and where is Mark Vientos playing? Because Jorge Polanco is an everyday player. Bo Bichette's an everyday player. They want Carson Bench to potentially be an everyday player. So I just don't see the spots and the playing time for the Mets to keep Swaggy V. I hope he becomes Swaggy V again, but I don't know how he's going to do it, getting not enough playing time in a Mets uniform. But hey, maybe he's a, super 90, 100 game guy that hits 300 for you in that limited time, maybe. But it seemed like he needed to play a lot to get comfortable last year, and he made that vocal. He said, I can't prove myself if I'm not playing. Well, you're going to hear him complain a lot more if he's not going to play again. That's all. That's all I'll say about that. That was a line from Forrest Gump, right? That's all I got to say about that. Middletown North says, no, just let Vientos and Beatty do it. J5 Muscle says, bro, give Beatty some respect. He 18 bounds with that sweet level swing sporadically. He's a 30 homer, 280 at least hitter. He needs consistent rep. Let he and Vientos play. The Mets messed up. Beatty, Vientos, Acuna, Mauricio up and down in the minors. Beatty should be on the field somewhere every day. Again, I like Brett Beatty. I just think we need to be careful about saying Brett Beatty's a 30 homer hitter. He's been in the league 5 years. He's got a lot of playing time, and he's not sniffed 30. So I'm not ready to say Beatty's a 30 homer hitter. I do think he's going to get time. I'm giving him respect because I do think he's going to get chances to play. We have to see if he could do it out of position. Can he do it in left field? He's only played there in the minor leagues. I'm not saying he can't. I agree with you that the Mets messed up. I think the really Mets messed up was Mauricio last year. I really thought the Mets messed Mauricio up, not just keeping him in AAA to get at bats and just rotting on the bench because they saved an option on his contract. That's where I think the Mets messed up. And that's why I think the Mets are helping these guys' careers. They sent Acuna to Chicago. He might be the center fielder for the White Sox. So that you make a good point is that the Mets don't want to do this with all those guys. But I don't think there's a place for all of them here. Because remember, you have A.J. Ewing still. You have Jacob Reimer in the system still. You have Ryan Clifford awaiting to be the next first baseman in 2027. So you have other guys waiting in the wings. But I'm not ready to say Brett Beatty's a 30 homer. That J5, I would say that's a bit of a push. But no, you make good points. PDG says left field is going to come back to bite them. It's a black hole right now. Benj isn't ready, and Beatty is not an outfielder. Should have signed Hayes for 1 year. I disagree. I think they have a lot of options left, and I still think they're looking, like I've said. I'm not ready to say Beatty's not ready to be an outfielder. He has played there in the minors. He does have a good arm. So I actually think Beatty could work out in left field. The Mets had Jeff McNeil in left field, and he was fine. Brett Beatty is more athletic and a better defensive player than Jeff McNeil. That's your only line you got to say. Jeff McNeil played left fine. I think almost anyone can. So I think Beatty will be fine there. I'm not ready to say they should have signed Austin Hayes for 1 year. Like, let's calm down about Austin Hayes. I mean, he's Austin Hayes. Solid player. I don't think the Mets need him. And listen, I wouldn't rule out a trade for Lars Nootbaar still. If the Mets can get Lars Nootbaar and JoJo Romero for like Mark Vientos and David Peterson or something like that, I think it makes sense for both teams. You get an outfielder. You get a great lefty reliever. Maybe that's too much, but I think there's maybe a package even that could work out with Lars Nootbaar and JoJo Romero where you fill left field and the bullpen. And then, Benj by the All-Star break becomes that guy. But I would not. I think calling left field a black hole when you have the potential of Benj, you have Beatty, you have Taylor, I think is just ill-informed. I think that's ill-informed. Chester says, totally disagree. The Mets walked away from Alonso because of the strikeouts. Suarez strikes out more than Alonso. The Mets are looking for less strikeouts and more contact. I'm a hard pass on Suarez. Thank you. Listen, I think the Mets walked away from Alonso, and I'm not going to go back on the Alonso front. If you've watched this show, you've heard me talk about that all off season and how the Mets wanted to move on from him in the clubhouse and didn't want to give him a 5-year deal and his defense. But you're 100% right. Eugenio Suarez strikes out a ton. All I'm saying is I would have took a flyer on Suarez's DH to hit me 40 homers for a 1-year deal. The Mets are in the 1-year deal business right now with a potential lockout next year. Alonso, it came down to 5,155, was just an absurd contract to give him, and the market was one team. That was the Orioles. The Orioles were the only team that wanted to sniff that Pete Alonso contract. So, but I don't disagree. I think the Mets are doing a good job of bringing in hitters that do strike out less. All I'm saying is I would have taken a flyer on Suarez, but I'm not losing an ounce of sleep over the Mets not getting Eugenio Suarez. Dennis says the Mets did not get Bellinger, Bregman, Tucker, Suarez. They need one of those players. They won't get past the Phillies, maybe second or third in the division this year. I disagree completely. The Phillies have had a god-awful offseason. The Phillies have done nothing this offseason. If you're looking at the NL East and how it stacks right now, it's probably the Mets and Braves at the top and maybe the Phillies in third. I don't think the Phillies did anywhere near enough to be sniffing a division title. They're basically running back the same team, yet they lost Ranger Suarez. They didn't bring in a Bichette. They lost Harrison Bader. If anything, the Phillies got worse this year, not better. Andrew says, Jake Brown wants to block any potential rookie or any of the young guys already in the roster. It's not that I want to block guys in the roster, but if there's players available for 1 year you can get and still go to the rookies in 2027, why not? I'm very much for playing the young guys, but, that doesn't mean you have to play them on opening day. Like, Carson Bench can still be the starting left fielder in July. Carson Bench has weeks of AAA experience. The Mets did that with Jonah Tong, and he crumbled in September. You don't want to fully rush a guy because we like the outlook of him. Doesn't mean Carson Bench isn't the future left fielder of the Mets because opening day is not in left field. Like the Mets still trust this farm, but if they're not starting Bench and Ryan Clifford on opening day, that doesn't mean, the young guys are never going to play. I'm telling you, 2027 and beyond, you're going to see a lot of youth. But if there's one more year, if the Mets going all in with some veterans that can hit, mixed with young players, they're going to do that if they want to compete with the Dodgers. But I'm all for the young guys. Believe me. I think the people against the young guys playing are the ones who wanted Alonso and Nimmo to stick around. It's part of the reason the Mets moved on from those guys because they cleared a spot for Bench. They cleared a spot at first base eventually for Ryan Clifford. The Mets have cleared spots for youth. So if anything, I'm all for the youth. I'm just not for the youth on opening day if they can do better than that. And I think they can. We'll close on that. Hit subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow on February 4th. We'll talk some Super Bowl at the end of the week as well. Give our Super Bowl picks. Thank you so much for watching. Keep in that subscribe. Let's get to 4K tomorrow. Thanks for watching. That's Daily.